Once you have your collage put together, an interesting direction to take your project is playing around with cutout shapes. So if I hide this top layer, you can see that I still have my collage put together. And then I added a layer where I'm cutting out different shapes to have see through for that collage underneath. So to get started with that, I'm just going to open my regular collage image here, and I still have all my layers. But I'm going to add at the very top a new layer, and then on the left I'm going to grab my paintbrush or my paint bucket, which should be hidden underneath your gradient tool. So if you click and hold down that gradient tool, you can find the paint bucket, and I'm going to fill that with white. And then I'm going to grab the lasso tool, the Polygonal Lasso tool, which if you click and hold down your regular lasso tool, you'll have that middle one, which allows you to create straight lines versus that first lasso tool, which is just freehand or freeform. So I'm going to hold that down, grab the Polygonal Lasso tool, and then you can decide what you want your shapes to look like, but I would think of some sort of design. So try not to make it too random and try not to make too many small shapes. So I would stick with a lot of larger shapes for this. Triangles could work well, so I'll show you just a few triangle shapes here, but again, there's a lot you could do with it. So I'm just clicking to create an outline of a shape, and then make sure you click where you ended or where you started to end your shape. And then all you have to do from here is hit delete on your keyboard, and it will cut out that shape. So I hit delete. Command D will deselect so you can move on and add another shape. So I'm just going to kind of follow the outline of what I have here. Maybe make a different size triangle and hit delete again. So think about what you want your design to look like. There's a lot of different routes you could go. So I would play around with a few different options. Maybe you make multiple layers and then just hide a few of these layers as you're working and see which one ended up the best. And that's probably the route I would go, at least when you're working on your final image, because there is, again, a lot you can do with the different shapes that you're working with. So now I have a couple of shapes here. I'm going to show you next how to add a drop shadow within these shapes, which will just make it look like they're actually cut out and on top of the image that you're working with. And I'm going to actually add one more shape here, one more triangle, and then delete. Alright, so I'm going to double click on my layer off to the side, so this white layer that I added. And I'm going to click on drop shadow. And then you can play around with some of the settings here to get the drop shadow set up how you want or however it looks the best. This circle here will create the angle that the shadow is at. So I'm going to pick one that's kind of off to the side here versus one that is centered. So there's those shadows off to the side. The opacity is how dark your drop shadow is, so that's something to think about, is how dark you want it, whether you want it to look like an outline or more of a shadow. Distance is how far away it is from the edge of your image. Spread is how blurry the outside is, so you're going to want it somewhat low here so it fades into the image. And then size is obviously how wide the drop shadow goes out to. So I'd play around with that and see what looks the best for your image. When you're done, you can hit OK and it will add that drop shadow. You could also play around with different colors for your image. You don't have to have it set to white. You could even try the gradient tool if you click and hold that paint bucket down. The gradient tool will use the two colors in the bottom left corner that you're working with. So maybe I'll choose a pink for one, and then I'll have a blue, kind of a grayish blue here for another. And then I'm just going to click and drag across the image, and it will change the color of that drop shadow. But again, I would start with that so that you're able to go back in and cut out your shapes after you have it added.